The air in the Congo basin is thick. It is heavy with the scent of wet earth, decaying leaves. It sticks to your skin like a second layer. In the deep green twilight beneath the canopy, every snap of a twig sounds like a drumbeat of warning. It is here, in this immense and overwhelming jungle, that the whispers began. They were carried on the humid breeze passed from village to village along the winding brown river. The whispers told of a king. This was no ordinary king who ruled from a gilded throne. His power, they said, was not just from his warriors or his wealth, but from something far more terrifying. They said he ate the flesh of his enemies. The stories painted a chilling picture. They described a ruler whose strength grew with every human heart he consumed. His palace was not built of wood or stone. They murmured, but was decorated with the skulls of those who dared to defy him. Markets, instead of selling yams and fish, were said to openly display human limbs for the king's feast. These tales were not just for scaring children. They were spoken with a tremor of genuine fear by grown men traders who had traveled the treacherous river paths and hunters who knew the secrets of the deep forest. Long before any European ship reached its shores, the land we now call the Congo was not a savage wilderness. It was a complex mosaic of vibrant societies and powerful kingdoms. Great empires rose and fell along the mighty Congo River. Trade, culture, communication. The Kingdom of Congo, near the river's mouth, was a sophisticated state. Centralized government, noble class, extensive trade networks reaching deep into the interior. Its rulers, the Mana-Congos, commanded immense respect, wielded political and economic power. They were diplomats and administrators, not bloodthirsty ghouls. Further inland, powerful states held sway. The Luba Empire. The Lunda Empire dominated the southern savannah. Sprawling, intricate societies, artistic achievements, complex political structures, profound spiritual traditions. Their kings were seen as divine figures, conduits between spirit world and the living. The myth of the cannibal king did not spring from nowhere. It grew from a seed of truth, twisted and grotesquely enlarged. In some Central African societies, certain forms of ritual cannibalism did exist, though they were exceedingly rare and highly symbolic. This was never about food or sustenance. It was about power. Consuming a small part of a valiant enemy, for example, was believed to transfer that enemy's strength, courage. It was a ritual reserved for the most powerful warriors' chiefs, a solemn act meant to absorb the spirit of the vanquished. It was a universe away from the idea of a king feasting daily on his subjects. These isolated, specific rituals became the raw material for a much larger, more terrifying narrative. As stories traveled, they changed. A trader hearing about a chief who consumed the heart of a rival warrior would retell the story downriver. By the time it had been told 10 times, the chief was no longer consuming just a heart, but the entire body. The ritual was no longer a rare occurrence. The late 19th century brought a new kind of man to the Congo. These men carried maps, measuring tools, rifles. They were explorers, missionaries, agents of empire. They arrived during the scramble for Africa. Henry Morton Stanley, a leading figure. Stanley journeyed deep into the Congo, ostensibly for exploration, science, but really charting territory for exploitation. Stanley's accounts described hostile, savage tribes. He framed the region as chaotic, needing a civilizing hand. Whispers of cannibalism were a gift to him. Explorers were active participants shaping the story. They found signs of intertribal warfare. They saw skulls displayed as trophies. They read those signs as proof of cannibal feasts. They recorded and often exaggerated these tales in journals and letters. Those accounts were published in European newspapers and books. The public devoured sensational tales from a mysterious continent. The cannibal king became fact in the Western imagination. These stories justified the violence used to subdue the territory. Propaganda dehumanized rivals, making extermination seem acceptable. The colonial project claimed a noble, humanitarian purpose. How do you argue against stopping a king who supposedly ate his people? The myth was moral cover for brutal resource extraction. King Leopold II, who would own the Congo privately, mastered this PR. He framed the Congo Free State as philanthropic. Once King Leopold II had secured the Congo, the myth of the cannibal king became an essential cog in his colonial machine. The Congo Free State was not a state at all. It was, in fact, a massive slave labor camp designed for one purpose: to extract as much rubber, to extract as much ivory as quickly as possible. This required, honestly, unimaginable cruelty. To force local men to meet impossibly high rubber quotas, Leopold's agents and his brutal private army, the Force Publique, held women and children hostage. Those who failed to deliver were flogged, mutilated, killed. The symbol of this reign of terror became the severed hand, which soldiers were required to bring back to their posts to prove they had not wasted their bullets. This horrific reality needed to be hidden from the world, so the propaganda machine went into overdrive. The Congolese people were relentlessly portrayed as lazy, treacherous, inhumanly savage. The cannibal myth was the cornerstone of this dehumanization. How could people who ate each other possibly be victims? How could they feel the pain of a whip or the loss of a child in the same way a civilized European could? The stories of cannibal feasts, now widely circulated through official reports, missionary accounts, popular fiction, created a smokescreen that hid the true atrocities being committed by the colonizers themselves. The real cannibals, one might say, were the ones consuming the land. The relentless promotion of the cannibal myth had a profound and damaging effect on how the people of the Congo were viewed by the outside world. For generations of Europeans and Americans, the word Congo became synonymous with savagery. It conjured images not of great kingdoms or rich cultures, but of steaming jungles, frenzied drums, and a cooking pot with a missionary inside. This caricature flattened a diverse and complex region into a one-dimensional horror story. It was a prejudice that seeped into science literature and popular culture, creating a deeply ingrained racism that saw all Africans, and especially the Congolese, as inherently primitive and dangerous. This distorted view justified not only the initial colonial conquest, but also the continued paternalism and exploitation that followed. Even after the Congo Free State was handed over to the Belgian government, the idea that the Congolese were incapable of ruling themselves persisted. The rationale was always the same. Without European guidance, they would descend back into chaos and cannibalism. This belief system made it easier for the outside world to turn a blind eye to the ongoing economic exploitation of the Congo's vast mineral wealth. The people were seen as incidental to the resources their land held, their humanity cheapened by the persistent, ugly myth. Within the Congo, the legacy of the myth was complex and painful. The independence of the Congo in 1960 did not erase the shadows of the past. The ghost of the cannibal king lingered. The decades of colonial rule had left the country fractured and unprepared for self-governance. The world viewed the Congo through a lens of prejudice. It was quick to see the chaos that followed, the assassinations, the civil wars, the dictatorships, and concluded the Congolese were incapable of ruling themselves. The myth offered a convenient false explanation. This is just their nature. It absolved former colonial powers of responsibility for the conditions they created. This legacy still shapes modern perceptions. When conflict erupts today, media often falls back on old tropes. The violence is described as tribal, ancient, senseless, rather than political and economic conflict, often fueled by demand for the Congo's minerals. The stereotype of the irrational, violent Congolese descends from the cannibal myth. It makes it easier to consume the Congo's resources, coltan for our phones, without facing the human cost. To understand the legend, we must carefully separate the threads of fact from the thick weave of folklore. The factual thread is the existence of certain highly specific ritual practices in a few Central African societies. These were not about hunger. They were solemn, symbolic acts. For instance, the transfer of power from a dead king to his successor might involve the new king consuming a part of his predecessor, ensuring the continuity of the royal spirit. Similarly, a warrior might ingest a small portion of a formidable foe to absorb his courage. These were rare, esoteric rites, understood within a specific cultural and spiritual context. They were no more cannibalism in the popular sense than the Christian ritual of communion is. The folklore thread is what grew out of these facts. It is the story of the gluttonous king, the market of human limbs, the palace of skulls. These elements are the product of imagination, rumor, and fear. This work is vital. The legend of the Congo's cannibal king persists for a reason. It tells us more about ourselves than it does about the Congo. Stories about monsters are fundamental to the human experience. They are how we give a face to our deepest anxieties. We fear the dark. We fear the unknown. We fear the breakdown of social order. We fear the loss of our humanity. The cannibal violates the ultimate taboo. He becomes the perfect embodiment of those fears. By placing this monster in a distant, uncivilized land, we create a sense of safety and superiority. The monster is over there. We over here are the civilized ones. These stories provide simple answers to complex questions. It's easier to blame inherent savagery than to face colonialism. It's easier than confronting the Cold War's role. It's easier than facing the global economics of resource extraction. The monster story is a shortcut. It gives us a brief thrill of horror. Then it lets us turn away, comfortable that the problem isn't ours. The monster absolves us of responsibility. They're passed down through films. Each retelling reinforces the original lie, embedding it deeper into our collective subconscious. Even when we know it's false, it shapes our unconscious biases and emotional reactions. But it also reminds us of the enduring power of truth. Reflections not of the world as it is,